Congressman Denver Riggleman, Republican, 5th District, Virginia. Denver, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, John. How you doing today? And I just want to say the entire Virginia delegation is the only one that still meets every month in a bipartisan way. So there is still a Virginia way going on in Virginia. So that's why we all know each other so well.
I know. And when I questioned the congressman on the garbage that Pelosi tried to stuff in this bill, all the Green New Deal stuff, airline fuel regulations and Kennedy centers and NPRs, he never really answered the question because you can't answer it with a straight face, right? You just can't answer it.
I think, in there, John, and listen, the CARES Act, we had to do something, and we did the best we could in a compromised way based on the makeup of Congress, right? But I don't think people realize some of the other things. $300 billion for National Endowment of the Arts, $300 billion for National Endowment for the Humanities. But check this one out. There was $31 million in there for biosurveillance of wildlife. So I don't know what that really has to do with COVID-19. And there was $7.5 million there to clean the Smithsonian. I didn't know they were open during this time. So these are just some of the things when you went through it. There were billions of dollars in really bizarre asks that really had nothing to do with COVID-19. However, the PPP, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, since I'm on Financial Services Committee, those kind of things are valuable. And, I'm pretty good on the business side, so I was able to do some injects on the small business side through Kevin Brady and Ways and Means up to Mnuchin. So I'm pretty proud of some of the parts of the bill.
Well, look, as we said all week when this was being debated, you can't throw out the good for the sake of the perfect. It was not a perfect bill. A lot of the nonsense that Pelosi put in there, you guys were able to kick out. Some of it got in. It's, part of running a Republican, the way we do business, the lobbyists and everything else. Personally, I didn't like the corporate bailouts. I didn't like bailing out the airlines. I didn't like bailing out Boeing for management making bad decisions. But look, we can debate that. Let's talk about what's happening now. Another 6.6 million people filing for unemployment. 10 million people filing for unemployment, Denver, Riggleman, in 2 weeks. My concern is exactly what the president said here, that the cure is going to be worse than the situation. Millions and millions of people unemployed, no jobs, the economy collapses. And I'm just concerned that there doesn't seem to be a consensus in America that there's got to be a balance here. And I want to get your perspective.
Yeah, I was as a military mission planner, the thing that I brought up, even while we were going through this bill and meetings till midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, was is there a possibility in the future for something like a regional mitigation plan? And, those areas not hardest hit, allow them to do business once they, get the all clear, or to allow even counties to allow them to do business. Because right now we're sort of a one size fits all across the entire country as the governors shut down the states consecutively. So I think we got to have some kind of regional mitigation because right now, I own a company and we have about 30 employees. Our part-timers we haven't scheduled. We still haven't officially laid anybody off. I've tried to keep everybody on. I've done pretty well in business, so I've been able to do that. But, Christine and I are digging into our personal finances, to keep people on the books. And I think we want to make sure that they're taken care of. But there's going to come a point in the next month or two, John, where I don't have the actually financial ability to do it. I'm very blunt. I am very transparent. Our company will survive. We will survive through this, but I got to make sure everybody's taken care of. And that's why I was so directed on the PPP, but also directed on the employee benefits side of this also, is that this is through no fault of their own. And I will tell you, I don't look at this as a bailout. I look at this as a health emergency. And, a lot of companies are failing through no fault of their own based on the forced mandates. And we got to be very, very careful because, politically, and I'm not much of a politician, but politically, people are like, well, safety first. I get it. Health is first. But we have to worry about mental health and how it's affecting people as companies collapse, as health insurance is overwhelmed, as health care is overwhelmed. What happens on the other side of this? So there's got to be a balance between making sure we mitigate the awful effects of COVID-19 and we mitigate the awful effects of a collapsed economy and what that does to people after this. There's cascading effects here. And I do think we're going to have to look at each area as a region, and we're going to have to close or open regions, not a one-size-fits-all.
How do we get to the other side, Denver Riggleman?
I know people want answers on this. Let me tell you this. If this lasts 5 or 6 months instead of 3 or 4, if this lasts, 6 to 8 months, there's going to have to be some tough decisions made on what opens and what doesn't. And the other side of this looks like saving as many lives as possible. We get that. I get that. My gosh, I have 2 pregnant daughters right now, John, right? So everybody, I'm not special. There's, 739,000 people who have it worse than I do in my district, and my job is to help them. And that's all I'm concentrating on right now is this. This is it. This is my job as a congressman. And so I think the other side of this looks like an economy that's going to take 5 to 10 years to come back from. You're going to see probably in our county, gosh, John, 30 to 50% of the businesses shuttered for good. You're going to talk about unemployment in the double digits. So it's going to be a long road back. And I think all of us have to work together, but I think there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made now about what happens in a month or so if the coronavirus is still ticking along at the rate it's ticking along at right now.
When you say tough decisions, define what those are, Congressman Denver Riggleman.
What do you open? What don't you? I mean,
Right.
At what point do you say, okay, our economy's collapsed, we have got to kickstart this back again? And how do we incentivize, based on the deficit we're in right now, manufacturing coming back here away from places like China, right? And then again, how do we mitigate the damages that places like China do? You're telling me that China doesn't owe us a few $1 trillion right now? So there's a lot of things we got to do, foreign affairs wise, international affairs wise. Also, there's people who need to be held accountable, and
Right.
That's something that we have to look at also.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. We're with Congressman Denver Riggleman, Republican, 5th District of Virginia. That is kind of the south side, goes from Lynchburg all the way down through Danville, one of the biggest territories in the mid-Atlantic for a congressman to have, along with Griffith and the 9th. Let me ask you something, Congressman. There's now some talk bubbling around about a infrastructure bill, public works type of thing, job ready, shovel ready, building roads, bridges, tunnels, a new green economy, another $2.5 trillion or $3 trillion. The president said, hey, it's a good time to do that, low interest rates. A lot of us are saying, well, wait a minute, why don't we see how this goes first? What is your first reaction to that?
We need, again, there needs to be intelligence preparation of the battle space, right? We need to see what's happening first. Listen, I understand where the president wants to go with infrastructure because for telehealth and telemedicine, if you think about the 5th District and the 10,000 square miles we have, John, you know that about 50% of our 50 to 60% of my constituents don't even have access to high-speed internet, right? They can't really participate in the telehealth, telemedicine, telecounseling sort of program that we're doing right now. So there has to be an infrastructure growth. But I would humbly submit we might want to see what the damage is first,
right?
With coronavirus before we talk about $2 trillion more on infrastructure,
right.
Because it's not just going to be $2 trillion.
Right.
There's going to be a $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion of, we're going to have the far left giveaways, right? So you're going to have to fight. So if we go for $2 trillion, there's going to be $2 trillion of fluff in there for Congress because we have a split house, right? So that's really what's going on. I want to see what happens first before I even talk about $2 trillion in infrastructure.
That what you just said, Denver Riggleman, you nailed it, because it's not $2 trillion because the Democrats control the House. I mean, it is what it is. Elections have consequences. There's going to be another $2 trillion of garbage in there, just like they tried to stuff in to this bill, and I can never get a straight answer from Bobby Scott. And there's no reasonable Democrat congressman who can come on the air and give any justification for any of this. So they sidestepped the issue by talking about testing or what Trump did or didn't do, or he had a hat on at the CDC or whatever nonsense they come out with. The reality is, look, we all could have done a better job earlier looking at it, as Korea did. But now I think the president's doing everything in his power to get this thing behind us as quickly as possible.
He is. And listen, I've been in meetings. There is nobody who's taking this lightly, and it's brutal. And I think you saw the numbers. You talked about the unemployment claims. I think you're seeing the sort of the exponential growth in coronavirus across the world. We're going to hit 1 million today. It's going to happen. So people need to realize this is real. A buddy of mine yesterday, his best friend at 54 years old, who he just talked to a couple of weeks ago, died from complications from COVID yesterday. This is starting to hit people closer and closer to home. Mm-hmm. And, John, again, we're back to this, okay, we're at what? Less than 0.1% of the entire population's been, diagnosed with COVID, maybe half of 0.1%. However, these communities, as these blooms happen, we don't know what the extent of that could be. And if you look at the percentages in Italy, they're much worse than what we have here. Mm-hmm. So again, we're looking at Italy as we've been doing that for the past week. I do believe at this point that we will, in the next few weeks, have to come up with another plan on regional issues. And I just think it has to be done. And I think listen, the two biggest calls I'm getting right now, the three biggest calls. You ready for this, John? Mm-hmm. Number one, businesses screaming about being shut down when their counties have one case of coronavirus. I mean, I'm getting overloaded with phone calls, about that at this point. Mm-hmm. It's just never ending. And I get it. Number two, civil liberties. People think that the government's overreaching, so I'm getting phone calls about civil liberties. Now, it's about half and half, though. Civil liberties, and other people saying this is a great job by the governor and the president. Other half saying our civil liberties are being destroyed for what we think is an overreaction. Those are the calls that I'm getting. The third one is about PPE, personal protection equipment, and issues from hospitals, healthcare providers, and things like that. Those are my top three calls. And so those are the things I'm going through. When I say calls, I'm not talking about 5 per day, John. I'm talking about hundreds, and I'm talking about text, and I'm talking about our staff. So, again, you're going to start to see some split and some division on the actions of the governors as they're going forth on these mitigation plans. As people say, I'm going back to work whether you like it or not. My family is suffering. So this is going to be real, and I think that's why Americans need to stay together, know we're in it together, and try to look at things through a glass as we're going to get to the other side of this. But this is going to be extremely difficult.
The governor shut Virginia down through June 10th. Do you see this going beyond that?
I think he did June 10th to manage expectations because I think you can roll back. It says in his that he can
you can roll back. Yeah.
You can roll back. It's tougher. For 30-day stints, it's very difficult. People want to plan. Right. They can roll back, but my guess was I wanted to be out of this, or at least on the other side of this, or getting to that side by Independence Day, July 4th.
Right.
That's been in my head as I've talked to some people with first week in July. However, if the growth of coronavirus, if we don't flatten the curve in a significant way by the middle of May, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see measures into the middle of August. And I think that's why we have to be extremely diligent in trying to flatten the curve as quickly as possible, because I don't know how many companies can last through the middle of August in this environment.
So love what you're saying, and it's kind of what Bobby Scott said. We have to do our part. Scott said the same thing, your colleague. We have to do our part right now to flatten the curve out so that hospitals are not overrun, so that when we get to June or we get to the end of May, we're going to be in a position to start opening some things up. If we don't do that, this thing is going to drag on until August, which is going to be disastrous for the country, people, families, households. And, I'll tell you the same thing I told Congressman Scott. I mean, you get 10 million people filing for unemployment in 2 weeks. I mean, if this goes on, you're going to have to start to look at people committing suicide, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, family splitting up, mental illness, nervous breakdowns. I mean, you start taking the ability to support your family away from moms and dads, and all hell breaks loose. I mean, I saw it, Denver. I lived through it in 2008 like no one else. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw what I did to my own family, what I did to friends of mine, and that is a fraction of what we're getting now with 10 million people having applied for unemployment. I want to get to politics as a reality. We have to get to that. I'm sorry. You have a convention to get renominated, to get reelected to a second term. I assume that convention has been put off. How does this work now?
There's no constitutional path for how this works. There is no convention. My thing is that we should have a primary, which we should have had from the beginning. My thoughts on conventions, especially in Virginia, and how corrupt they become.
Yes.
Keep it small, control it all.
Right.
And I got to tell you, now that I've been through a few, I observed Tom Garrett's in 2016. I observed Ben Klein's. I had never been through one myself. Then we did a horrendous committee vote last time because there was always a nominee, and and Tom needed to get out for personal reasons. But this time there is no nominee, so a committee vote, you got to have 2/3. So, and now, we have some people in the committee who want to now vote because they know I would win a convention, they know I'd win a primary, they know I'd win a firehouse primary, they know I'd win a hybrid. So now they're trying to do a closed-door vote. You can't do that either. So what we're going to do is hopefully...
Closed-door vote?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Vote. Yeah, because, listen, we ran such an incredible campaign, and, and I'm very transparent and tell the truth, and people know that's just the true about me. And sometimes you'll have somebody else who has a problem with the truth, or maybe they don't do very good research and not ready for prime time. And, my thing is that right now I don't even hardly have time to concentrate on the campaign with 740,000 people in a 10th district. You know the size of my district. So I am concentrating on doing my job because I'm a congressman 8 more months regardless, win or lose. My job is the 5th district. My job is to serve. But my job is also to independently say what happens and what I think is going to happen. Here's the thing, John, is that there's no convention that's going to happen. We're going to have to eventually get to a primary. Or if they keep stalling, there will be, it's possible there's some outside possibilities. There's no nominee at all. And that's what happens when you have a process that is so convoluted, it's so conflicted, it's so corrupt that it can't withstand any type of crisis. And it's arcane, archaic, and it has no place in politics, these conventions anymore. They are absolutely beyond the pale. It's time to stop disenfranchising people and allow everyone to vote.
They're horrific. They're open to get rigged. There's professional convention riggers. They've torn the soul and the very guts out of the Republican Party in Virginia. They've destroyed it. And you still got a group of people that want them because they know how to rig them and win them. And so it's like you said, keep it small, control it all. Joe Morrissey, state senator, has a bill that he's determined to get on the floor for debate next year, which is to outlaw conventions in Virginia for any federal or state offices. You want to have a convention, you have to have it for your committee chairman or your mass meeting or your state chairman, whatever. But he says all federal offices, all state offices, House of Delegates member, you have to have a primary nominating contest. I'm 100% behind that bill because I think Virginia should just say, you know what, enough, and outlaw them.
Disenfranchising voters is something we've been trying to get away from in the history of our entire republic. And, the fact is that you want to keep it to such a small group. And, by the way, if people could count the ways you can corrupt this process, John, we could have a whole show, about, counties that the committee chairman doesn't like a candidate. They only have 2 weeks to allow you to file delegates by paper only. And then they'll go to their special people and not tell the other candidate what's going on till the last second. It is absolutely awful. And listen, win or lose, my job is to tear open, that type of corruption and make sure that people are not disenfranchised. Everybody needs to get involved. The Republican Party needs to be big tent. The Republican Party needs to be about everyone. We need to unify, and we need to bring as many people as we can into the Republican Party. And whether that's moderates, libertarians, independents, we need to make sure they're part of what we want to do. And that one thing is this. It's individual liberty, right? It's keeping, and that is really what it comes down to. And under individual liberty is everything else, right? Taxes. It's allowing businesses to thrive. It's the government staying out of your business, out of your bedroom, right? It's out of your pocketbook. All of that. That's what this is about. The Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. The Republican Party is the party of emancipation. The party of Lincoln is the party of inclusion, and I think we need to get back to that.
Spot on. Denver Riggleman. Hey, Denver, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. This is going to be a trying time. We're going to need your leadership and everybody's leadership and commitment to help us get through this. And anybody listening out there, here's Denver's call. Do what you can right now in order to flatten this curve so we don't overrun hospital beds, ICUs, ventilators, so we can start opening things up at the end of May, beginning of June, because like he says, if this thing expands to August, we might never come back, or it could be decades of suffering economically. So we got to do our part in order to get there. Denver Riggleman, thank you.
John, you take care. Stay safe. Okay, buddy?